want to begin by welcoming everyone to, let's see, when is this? October, November, December, January, February, March, our 7th webinar in the EOT webinar series. I'm Chris Thurber. I'm the co-founder of Expert Online Training, and we're joined today by one of our esteemed faculty members, Cathy Scheder, who's joining us from Stevens Point, Wisconsin. Cathy is, among other expertise, an expert in aquatics. And in a minute, I'll show you the cover of her book, Camp Waterfront Management. But I want to begin with a question, and that is, what is the difference between being certified and being qualified? If you don't know the difference, it may have an enormous effect on how safe your waterfront is. Mm-hmm. So, Cathy, I'd love for you to introduce yourself in a little bit more detail and take a stab at answering this question while I load up the slide deck.
Sorry, and you cut out a little bit, Chris. It was the difference between being certified and being qualified?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, great. Hi, everyone. It's good to be here today. I'm Cathy Scheder. I currently am at the University of Wisconsin in Stevens Point. I work in the College of Professional Studies and Education. But my background is in camp and youth development, and I spent quite a bit of time working in camp and youth development, and some time with ACA at the National Office for the American Camp Association. And I'm a longtime waterfront director. I'm not currently a waterfront director, but that's how I got my start in camp. And so, yeah, a little bit about, that's a little bit of my background. I'm also a standards accreditation and standards trainer for the American Camp Association, as well as an instructor and a visitor. And so this is a great opportunity. This topic is really core to my heart, and clearly I've written a book about it because there was no information about really how to do this big job, and that was on waterfronts. But I also know, Chris, we're going to talk about pool safety as well.
Mm-hmm. So. Yes. All right, awesome. And we should mention to everyone that it's really Dr. Cathy Scheder. And if you want to give Cathy some thumbs up or some smiley faces in the chat room, she is a fairly newly minted PhD. So congratulations, Cathy. I know that that's a huge achievement. All right, so let's see. Here's what I want to do. I'm going to show people a couple of slides, and they're going to be able to hear and see us, but in a smaller format. First, I want to let you all know that Camp Waterfront Management is available on Amazon. And, you know, Cathy's been EOT faculty member since 2011. She has some wonderful videos up on our website regarding the differences between lifeguarding in a pool and lifeguarding in a natural setting like a lake or on the ocean. Verifying lifeguards' skills, which is something we're going to be talking about today. Running appropriate swim checks for young people when they come to your day or resident programs. And Cathy also has a lot in this book on the design of a safe waterfront, which is something that she and I have both presented on. And like Cathy, I am no longer waterfront director, but spent 25 years as the waterfront director at YMCA Camp Belknap. So I hope that both of us will be good resources for you today, and that you post your questions in the chat room. Let me just get the discussion going by sharing a couple of images and get you to think about this. Just sort of look at this typical camp setting, and the question on the table is, what concerns do you have about the lifeguards who are in this picture? So keep that in mind, make a sort of mental note, and I'll go over to the, Cathy, can you actually see on your window the chat room? Do you want to respond to anybody's observations?
Let's see, did I have the chat? I think I have the chat up. I see Evan's message. I'm not seeing other messages though, so it might be. Okay,
so we'll come back. I'll be able to come back to the chat room from my slideshow in just a minute, but go ahead and type in, those of you who are joining us, what are I see at least two things that are of concern. You may see others, but go ahead and type those in. And now I'll show you another picture. Same question. What concerns do you have about the lifeguards in this picture? Again, I see at least two things. There may be more. Other people with sharper eyes. And then before I wrap up the slide deck, I just wanted to give you a quick screenshot of the Express page on Expert Online Training. Some of you use Expert Online Training and our library of video training modules, which include Cathy's videos on aquatics. We have about 130 10 to 12 minute videos on a variety of topics that encompass safety, youth development, supervision, leadership. But here on the Express page, which if you go all the way down to the bottom of the website and click on Express, you'll see each month we feature a different video, a different related article or two, and its handout. So the video that we're featuring this month, because we have Cathy as our guest on the webinar, is about aquatic safety, and it's one that Cathy made, and her handout that goes along with that, and then a couple of articles that have recently appeared in industry publications on lifeguarding. So check that out. We always have a different featured webinar video and handout on the Express page. All right, I'm going to stop the slideshow and go back to the chat room, and let's see what people wrote.
Yeah, I can see those, Chris, if I can jump in.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, and actually, there's really good comments that I'm seeing from Kathy Hutchins, Amanda Grassick, Dave Kennedy. So guards are they're sitting, they're not ready to respond. This was last summer, and I walked down to a waterfront area, and that was the first thing I saw. Now, granted, there weren't a lot of kids in the water, and it was August, and so I understand that. But at the same time, these guards are not prepared to respond to an emergency as quickly as they probably could. So that's my take. They're not clearly identified as lifeguards. The guy who was throwing the football, the lifeguard at one point was also doing that. So that distraction piece is a big concern in this area. The rescue tube, for Aaron's mentioning that the rescue tube, the guard is sitting on the tube and the tube strap is still coiled. So clearly these guards are actually not ready. And I think it shows a couple of different things. One, it's in August, and so I think sometimes our staff can get complacent because, they're doing this day in and day out. I loved working the waterfront, but as a lifeguard, it can get mundane, and that's why we want to rotate guards into different positions while they're working those waterfronts. The other piece is certified does not necessarily mean qualified, and Chris kind of kicked us off that way in terms of what those differences really are. So if I have a lifeguard card from the American Red Cross, from Ellis and Associates, the Royal Life Saving Society, if you work with international staff, just because they have the card does not necessarily mean that they have the qualifications to do what the card says that they can do. It just means they probably passed those skills at the time that the lifeguard instructor was actually doing those things. And so I've seen lifeguard instructors literally carry people through a program because they wanted them to complete. And that's a concern. And that's why we want to do those skills verifications. It's one of the reasons ACA requires you to do those skills verification checks.
Can you say what a skills verification looks like? And you mentioned that ACA has not only skills verification as a standard, but we'll share some links to, I'll find them and post them. You sent them to me while you're talking. We'll put them in the chat room here. But say what resources ACA has available. Sure.
So let's start with what skills verification actually means. And so we want lifeguards need to, you as the camp director, depending on what your role is in camp, or the waterfront director, need to know that your lifeguards have those skills that card says that they do. And there are different levels of those skills that they'll have. And so skills verification is one way to determine that. It's recommended that you have a lifeguard instructor perform those skills, somebody who knows exactly what needs to happen and how those skills are to be carried out. The other piece of, I had that thought, went right out of my head. So the skills verification is actually really important. The other piece, here it is. I don't have statistics on this, but anecdotally, I would tell you most of your lifeguards are probably certified in pool environments. Okay, so they're in a box with 4 walls, clear water, could be indoors or outdoors, but the majority of them are probably being certified in a pool. Mm-hmm. So if you run a waterfront, if you are on a river, on a lake, on the ocean, that skills verification also needs to take place in every body of water that they are certified, that they're actually guarding. And there are differences between those two environments. The videos that Chris mentions that I have done in the past demonstrate those differences, and you can see the differences, like things like glare on the water looks really different. It can be turbid, those kinds of things. And so staff want to get really comfortable, and you need them to be comfortable in those environments. If they've never swum in a pool and lake environment or a waterfront environment that's not a pool, that can be really daunting for a lot of people. So ACA has really great skills verification sheets. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Those already exist for you to go to the website and download. You don't even have to be a member of ACA to do it. But it's a great resource to have available that you can actually put your staff name in on one side. It really looks like an American Red Cross skills check sheet. It's really similar to that. And then check off. That's all you want to do. And if you're an accredited camp, ACA is going to look for that written documentation.
And one of the things that we did, and I say did, we still do, but you and I were talking last night, Cathy, about this skills verification part, and it wasn't, I guess maybe 12 or 15 years ago, we had a standards visitor at the camp where I've spent now coming up on my 38th summer, who, I don't know whether it was newly added standard or we were just being visited with greater attention to detail, but she said, it's wonderful that your lifeguards go through this on-site training that familiarizes them with the idiosyncrasies of your waterfront, but you need to document that they can perform all of these skills. So I showed her the syllabus that I had developed for in-service training, but I had not completed a checklist, like you said. When we made the checklist, and this is how we do it now, as I said, for the last 12 to 15 years, we were able to see very quickly who were our staff who arrived a bit late and didn't quite get a chance to, for example, show us a reaching assist and a throwing assist, or who had an appointment in town and had to leave the second day of in-service training early and still needs to demonstrate a deep water recovery of a passive victim. Otherwise, there would have been no way to keep track of it. So wonderful kind of insider tip. When you make a skills verification sheet that is customized to your summer youth program, and you can either write to me or Cathy, or for the skill sheets that we've developed, or I've posted the links here in the chat room, you can download ACAs. But two keys. One is you have to add the things that are specific to your waterfront, right? So I work with a camp in Alabama that's on a river with a slow current, a gentle current, if you will. And we need to make sure that the guards are comfortable doing a lost bather drill in that current, right? So that's something that wouldn't be necessarily lost bather drill is going to be on the checklist, but not in water that has a current. So that they've demonstrated they can perform the skill at your particular waterfront. That's Cathy's point. And my insider tip is print these skill sheets on waterproof paper, which you can buy on Amazon or other places. You write on it with a ballpoint pen. Best kind of pen actually are those space pens that you can write at all different angles. They're not that expensive. They write well on that waterproof paper, it can go right through your laser printer or photocopy or inkjet, but it's not going to turn into mush when it gets wet. And I promise you it will get wet during your lifeguard training. So
you hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah, the piece of clarification in terms of, that environment, it's a really good tip, Chris, that every waterfront is different. The standards for ACA don't say that it has to be in that specific, it has to be in a similar environment. So
right.
A lot of times the questions that I get from people are, we don't have a lifeguard instructor, what do I do? You can partner with another camp and do it at a different location, but you have similar lakes, or you're on similar rivers,
right.
something like that. So it doesn't realize that the resources are out there, and if anyone has questions, they can always email me, and I'd be happy to connect them with links. Connect with your local YMCA, ACC, somebody who's going to consistently be training lifeguards in that way that might be able to come out to your program to help you do those skills verifications.
Right.
If I didn't have a background in aquatics, I would have to trust my waterfront staff to do that, or give them the resources available to do that as well.
And one of the things that you're doing, it's not just about meeting the standard, right? I mean, what we're trying to do here is save lives and create a safe and fun waterfront. You're also making your guards so much more comfortable, because they're not going to come to you and say, Cathy, I'm a little bit nervous about opening day because although I have this brand new lifeguard cert, I've only really successfully backboarded someone, who was pretending to have a spinal injury once. That's
Right.
all we had to do. We
Yeah.
messed it up 2 or 3 times. We did it once for the final checkout in the class. And that's great. And that's like what a certification course is going to do. But, one of the things that you should be doing at your waterfront is a backboarding drill at least once a week and a lost bather drill at least once a week, so that your staff are comfortable doing it. And they're going to discover all of the quirky things about, well, extricating someone on a backboard in this setting is different than in a pool, or the lake where I trained is different from this lake and it gets really mucky over here, so what could we do about bringing the person over here? Or we can extricate them, that's all we practiced in the course. But where's an ambulance going to come at our camp? Is it coming all the way down to the to the lakefront, or is it going to be somewhere else? So not only will you build confidence in your lifeguarding team, but you're also, when you do this skills verification, going to discover some quirks, in the performance of a particular life-saving skill that without practice, without this kind of verification, you never would have discovered.
Right. Yeah, and that's a really, we don't want, you have a lot of really good points. We don't want to do the skills verification just to check off the box.
Yeah.
It is about making sure that the staff are prepared and your camp is prepared, and even that your campers are prepared in that way. When your staff model these types of these scenarios, I think a couple suggestions I would make is that when you're doing those skills verification, it's not just backboard. You really want to demonstrate the scenario, like this is what happened: dove off the diving board, came up floating face down, go.
Mm-hmm.
And then they get to shore, you backboard them, and all of a sudden they're non-responsive. They're not breathing, they don't have a pulse. So you want your guards to be able to respond to real life scenarios in that way. The other piece I would recommend for all camps is to not only, you bring up weekly, so there's a couple challenges to that, especially in 24/7 resident camps, when you can try and get all your lifeguards together. That doesn't always necessarily work. So my recommendation has always been small groups. Pull them out, create a time, and run them through activities that way. Do the same scenarios, and sometimes that's actually better than having a large group of 10 or 15 lifeguards all trying to do the same thing. The waterfront director can actually help guide those processes a little bit better in that way. The other thing I would recommend is they need to be swimming. They need to be in the water. They need to be just physically swimming and learning how to, and not even learning, but the American Red Cross and most of the lifeguard certifications have really reduced the prerequisite swim. Back in the day when I was doing life saving, it was 500 yards, and we would swim laps every day before we got in the water. Conditioning is really different today, and so that ability for those lifeguards needs to be able to get from point A to point B pretty quickly. My gauge was always, I want you to swim from here to the furthest point out and back, go, because they need to build up those physical muscles to be able to do that. It's conditioning like anything else. And then I recommend cross training too. It doesn't always have to be in the water. So, get out on a bike, do something where they're physically active. And I know camp is a really physically active place, but dedicated time to training and conditioning is really helpful.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned that. And I think comfort, again, somebody may be in excellent swimming shape and they can do several thousand yards with no problem, or at least they can do 500 yards with no problem, but how do they feel doing 500 yards in a location where, unlike their pool at home, the water's a little colder and they can't see the bottom? For some people it makes them really claustrophobic, or they realize that if they're going to be an effective lifeguard, they need to have goggles with them because they wear contacts, or if they wear contacts and they're just one-day disposables, they're just not going to worry about it. But stepping through those comfort scenarios, or stepping through those scenarios in order to feel more comfort, I think is really, really important. I want to just highlight one thing that Aaron Green noted, his comment. Aaron, I think, is at Kupagani, where one of our other EOT faculty members, Kevin Gordon, is. Aaron writes, if a parent or outsider were to come down to the waterfront and see this, I imagine you would lose that camp family ASAP. And that's true. Even if parents don't have a background in aquatics, you know, so the, you know, there are so many dimensions to this, the most important of which, of course, as we said, is being safe and saving lives. But you want to talk strictly from marketing standpoint, you know, if the lifeguards are on their duffs, that doesn't say a whole lot about how much they are, you know, caring for those kids or how seriously they're taking their jobs. Cathy, you mentioned something else, which I think all parents attend to, and that is leadership by example. So not just parents, but of course campers, which was your example, when they see the guards drilling a lost bather drill or a backboarding drill, or they see that the lifeguards are attentive, and you know, when a camper comes up to them and has a question, rather than having that face-to-face conversation, they're giving the answer, but they're still doing their job. You're sending a really clear message about what rules need to be followed and what the comportment of lifeguards should be if they, you know, if they take their job seriously.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm curious to know, because a couple of people wrote not clearly identified as lifeguards. If people want to text their comments about how do you identify your lifeguards, it could be, you know, a number of different ways. At Belknap, for example, you can tell who's a lifeguard because they are carrying a rescue tube, and nobody who's not a lifeguard is carrying one. So either a lifeguard or a lookout, but they're carrying a rescue tube or a reach pole. So the equipment identifies them, even though they might not all be wearing red guard shorts. But let's see if other people, you know, have comments there.
You're looking, I would chime in. You know, for us, it was always every waterfront staff member wore red, and so when camper mailings went out about what to bring to camp, it was always any bathing suit color but red, because we wanted to be able to differentiate where those guards were. And Camp Nicolay has a big waterfront. You know, we've got too much. We have natural sand beachfront. The lake is almost 1,000 acres, and so we have a strong ski program. When I was the waterfront director, I could see exactly where those lifeguards were sitting or standing, and I literally would bring the boat up and just be like, "You guys need to be up," because I can see them from a distance. I think a lot of times for parents as well, it gives them a sense of security when they can see, when you're walking parents through camp, especially new parents who are looking to see which camp they want to send their kids to. Those are our lifeguards. Those are all our waterfront staff. You can identify who they are by the color that they wear. So for us, that was a big deal, where people got waterfront. It was a real identifier for our staff that they got waterfront jackets that really just, it sets them apart, but in a good way.
So people have a bunch of different alternatives. Amanda writes, OCA, Ontario Camp Association standards mandate a hat or a shirt that says lifeguard on it. Aaron, colored zinc on the nose. I always had white zinc on my nose. That identified me as me, but I don't know. Only a few other lifeguards did. Tubes and red swimwear, like Cathy was saying. Equipment, as I was saying, standing on the docks and rafts with a red rescue tube around their waist. So yeah, I mean, it's so important from the standpoint of the waterfront director that they be able to identify who the guards are. And then, of course, you know, Cathy, I'd love for you to chime in on this. I'm a very strong advocate of both participants and staff, whether they're lifeguards or older, younger, doesn't matter. If you're in the water swimming, you've got a buddy. So that means the 6 a.m., you know, staff swim just to get in shape. You have to swim with a buddy. You know, if you come to general swim or free swim, you also have a buddy. And people always wonder, well, wait a second, you know, what if there's that one somewhat socially awkward camper who asks a few kids up in his unit or her unit, will you be my buddy, and gets denied? I say, during our all camp orientation, I always say to everybody, the staff, campers, everybody swims with a buddy no matter what. And if you can't find a buddy right away, don't worry about it. Come down to the waterfront. We always have an extra staff member who's happy to be your buddy. Or if you are a staff member, maybe we have a camper who wants to buddy up. But you're not going to have to wait because, you know, inside of 7 minutes, I'm going to blow the next buddy check. And there's always one buddy pair composed of the kid who's cold and the kid who wants to stay. So you just say, if you're a buddy pair where one of you wants to get out now, come see me at the gate, and I'm going to pair you up with somebody else because we've got a swimmer here who wants to get in. And, you know, you don't say like, well, we've got the singleton awkward kid who doesn't know. But this is a wonderful way for kids to get to swim with a staff member or to meet a kid they haven't met before. And you avoid the challenge of not having, you know, of kids feeling like they have to find a buddy up in their unit to come down. Or I would say the challenge of just taking that single kid and tripling them up with someone else. Triples don't watch each other as well as pairs do. And one of the wonderful things, as Cathy said, when you're lifeguarding, you're sustaining your attention and looking for a very low frequency event over a long period of time. So, you know, as Cathy talks about in camp waterfront management, making sure that the guard positions rotate, that helps keep them alert, making sure that they're hydrated, making sure that you're verifying your buddy system, you know, every 5 to 7 minutes, depending on how much, you know, how many buddies there are in the water. And this is something that Cathy, you taught me, having kids in pairs, not singles and not triples, gives lifeguards a target. So they're looking 2, 2, 2, 2, and all the lifeguards have, you know, they've learned how to scan in their lifeguarding classes, but if they're doing it at a public pool or something like that, where people don't have to buddy up, lifeguarding's a lot more complicated. But when you require buddy pairs, lifeguarding gets easier because you have a visual target and you're able to say to the kid you see swimming alone, hey, where's your buddy? So, oh, I don't know. Or over there getting a ball, or, you know, under the dock getting the diving brick or something like that. So really, really important. And if people have questions about, buddy systems, this would be a good time to write those in. Before you do, though, I'm going to announce the 2 winners of our $50 gift certificates. These are brought to you by our friends at Everything Summer Camp. Everything Summer Camp, as the name suggests, is a wonderful place to send your staff and your camper families for the best trunks in the industries, Foot Lockers if you use them, as well as lots and lots of other wonderful gear, branded clothing, and all kinds of cool stuff. So check out everythingsummercamp.com. And after our webinar concludes in a few minutes, I will be sending Matt Smith and Morgan Tobin $50 gift certificates to use however you would like at everythingsummercamp.com. All right, so Cathy, back to you. Buddy systems, what's your commentary?
Make sure you have them. Yeah. Buddy systems and buddy checks. I mean, I think that should be standard protocol for any program. ACA standards ask you what kind of safety systems are in place. As a lifeguard, having them buddy up, I was constantly counting numbers. I'm like, I knew how many kids were in the water. I knew what number we had to hit. And that's where it gets, nerve-wracking when you have one kid under the water, one above, and then anyhow. But I mean, buddy systems, you definitely want to find buddies that also have the same swimming ability and swimming level. You certainly don't want to put somebody who wants to go way out on the deep end, who wants to go off the raft or off the tramp or whatever it is, when their buddy who's paired up with them really shouldn't be swimming beyond the non-swimmer area.
Right.
So the staff need to be really aware of that. We had talked at the beginning, Chris, about doing swim checks. When we first start in camp, whether you're a day camp, resident camp, it doesn't really matter. You really want to do that day one. Our rule was if you didn't do a swim check, you're not doing any water activity at all. And some kids opted out that way, like, fine. But you really want to understand their swimming ability. So whoever's providing those checks needs to have an understanding of how to really measure strength in the water. So I always had them get in and they would do, 25 yards of front crawl, and then they do 25 yards of back crawl. And then I'd have them swim in deep water or tread water so we could kind of see. And I had kids who would say, yep, I can do it, and would jump off and be like, they'd go straight down. So that's why, and document that as well, because your waterfront director's not always on the beach or in the area all the time. And so the staff all need to be aware of those swimming levels and those swimming abilities. A lot of camps identify campers and staff by wristbands or color bands.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, some camps still do this, but it used to be swim caps were color coded differently. So you could, again, it's like your lifeguards, you could see exactly where they were in the water.
Mm-hmm.
So those kinds of pieces were really important to that as well.
Yeah, that's important. We just have a few minutes left, and I want to ask you a little bit about how you conduct a swim check when you're like, you gave us an example of how you did them at your camp. What are you looking for with regard to the deep water, shallow water divide? Is that a level in your mind of sort of where they would be classified in the Red Cross classification system or the YMCA classification system, or is there a skill, like you mentioned, treading water, that is a requirement if you're going to be in water over your head? What would you say for people who are wondering, okay, so we're going to have buddies grouped according to swim ability, what are some of the things to look for that qualify a person to swim in deeper water?
Yeah, it's for me it was because I had spent so much time on the water, I was really looking for comfort in the water. But I mean, a level in terms of Red Cross, and granted, it's been a while since I've seen the different levels, if those have changed. But they really need to be an intermediate swimmer to be able to be in that kind of deep water. And I think a lot of camps sometimes can have different levels of deep water, right?
Yeah.
And so it just depends. At Nicolay, our waterfront, basically at the end of the dock, our waterfront just plummets. And so from the end of the dock to another 10 feet out, we can be in almost 25, 30 feet of water. Wow. And so whereas like at the end of the dock, it's almost chest deep. And so it's a really significant drop. So we don't have that ability to be intermediate. And then, in more advanced levels, if they go past that rope, past the dock line, those are more advanced. I mean, those definitely have to be advanced swimmers to be able to do that. Because the other factors that take place are can't see in it, kids aren't comfortable in it. And so it's getting a gauge that they're just really comfortable in that environment. Sometimes that's a gut reaction, but minimally, I think they have to be at least an intermediate swimmer in order to go past that point or demonstrate that they have the comfort in the water to be able to do it.
Okay. All right. Well, good. Well, amazingly, our half hour has run out quickly. If people would like to contact you, of course, this is after they have bought and read your book, but if people would like to contact you with additional questions, what's the best way to get in touch with you? And I'll put that in a message up here.
Yeah, my email address is probably the quickest way to do that. It's
okay.
It's campaquatics@gmail.com.
Aquatics@gmail.com. Let me make sure I spelled it right. Yep, I think I did. All right. So I'm going to display that, and I will also let people know that a recording of this webinar and all of our other 30-minute webinars, which have touched on a variety of topics from, let's see, grit. Dr. Karen Baruch Feldman discussed that. I had the opportunity to discuss with Sarah Kurtz-McKinnon and Alex Myers, welcoming transgender campers to your camp. We actually did a two-part series. So you'll find on Expert Online Training's YouTube channel some wonderful webinar series, including this year, where our focus has been highlighting the work of a faculty member and giving you some ideas for conducting your staff training this spring or summer. We certainly hope that the information that you've gleaned from today's webinar has given you a nugget or two, a thing to notch up your aquatics program. Cathy, any closing comments or suggestions?
No, I mean, I hope everybody has a safe summer, and this has been really great. And again, if anyone has questions, or, even for me, it's always about what are the big questions out there that people just want to know. And sometimes that can be something as simple as, how do I find a lifeguard instructor to help train, or something we might not have even thought about. Chris, you and I talk a lot about waterfront management. we spend a lot of time with it, but we're only 2 people. So
Yeah.
any information people want to share is great.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you all for joining us. On behalf of Dr. Cathy Scheder, I'm Dr. Chris Thurber, and thanking you from the entire Expert Online Training team. This webinar and others available on our YouTube channel, and be sure to check out the Express page on expertonlinetraining.com if you'd like to, for free, watch one of Cathy's videos, download one of her handouts, and read some articles on aquatics. So that's it. Wishing you all a safe and happy summer. Take care.
Thanks
Thank
all.
you, Cathy.
You bet. Thanks, Chris.